simultaneously in the afterlife. I'm gonna leak all of the Smash Brothers characters. Tamagotchi, Lara Croft, and, Snake from Office Snake. Yeah, probably that one. This isn't a diaper.
Hello, and welcome to the Kongversation. I'm Hyle Russell.
And I'm Jeff Onan.
And you might notice our setup's a bit different here this episode. We can't not record in the usual DK Vine studios, a very lush setup, because if you're a crowd of over 10 people, that's a no-no right now. That is a no-no right now, Jeff. We have to isolate ourselves to halt the spread of coronavirus. So Jeff and I are actually recording this over Skype because, this is a first. This is a first on the Kongversation because normally we have, two of us at the very least, and then we have all of our engineers to make sure that this sounds as professional as it does. We have our butler, our gentleman's gentleman, to bring us beverages and various illicit substances to keep us going. We have the on-set fluffer, because you got to be fluffed for the Kongversation, right? So we're doing this gorilla style, and not the furry kind that we like. We're doing this completely low tech over Skype. The studio has been boarded up for the time being until this coronavirus pandemic has ceased, has worked itself out of the global system. Jeff, how are you holding up in these weird times?
I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you, Hyle. I don't love it.
You don't love it?
I don't love it.
You don't love being a weird shut-in that smells?
Oh no, that's usual. That's not changed. I prefer when we record normally in the DK Vine studios, and I get to sit on your lap while we do it.
That is a pretty good bit.
Yeah, so I can reach the mic and you kind of...
But then I also paint those lines on your chin so you look like a dummy, a little ventriloquist dummy.
Well, look like more of a dummy than I already am. That being said...
I put that monocle on your face, Jeff, but then it's actually just a broken piece of beer bottle and you start bleeding and we all have a good laugh.
Yeah.
That classic bit.
Yeah.
That classic bit on the Kongversation. No, these are weird times. It's a weird moment in our shared collective narrative, Jeff. And all I can say is, we'll get through it. This is hopefully a once in a lifetime thing, but we're all kind of living day by day, waiting to see what tomorrow will bring. But this is something that we're all experiencing, like, as a global community. So I am a glass half full kind of guy. When I'm not breaking off a piece of that glass to stick in your eye. So
what's in your half glass tonight, Hyle? I'm making some little chit chat with you. A little bit of chit chat.
Are you saying like my figurative glass, or what am I actually drinking?
What are you drinking? What's getting you through this mini apocalypse?
Are you still talking in the figurative, or are you talking literally?
Are you drinking a beverage, Hyle, with your mouth, with the liquid in your mouth?
Because I was going to say something really sweet, Jeff, about how maybe this will bring us all together and make us realize we're not so different after all. We all catch the same viruses, and we'll realize we're all on this planet together. We're all in this together, and maybe this could be a turning point for mankind and womankind.
Hyle, do you really think if anybody in the world needs to hear that right now, they're going to believe it coming out of your mouth? We talk about Donkey Kong. It's not our job.
I'm drinking carbonated water, Jeff, because it hurts when you swallow it.
I'm drinking talkie water. That's that kind of grown-up no-no juice that gets you talking.
Oh, I thought that was the piss from Funky's personal animal buddy, Talks the Parrot.
Yeah, it's made of that.
I know, we're not really raising people's spirits here, Jeff.
No, listen. People are bored. They want to tune in for some conversation, not conversation necessarily, but they need to hear some conversation. They need to hear topics and points. And mainly what they want is they want to be witness to grown men having mental breakdowns, and then recorded for posterity over Twitch/podcast twitch.podcast.com.
Twitch/podcast.com. Check it out, everyone. Yeah, well, this is fine. We're gonna keep cranking out these conversations until like the world governments say, "Hey, you can't do that. It's lowering morale," and then we'll have to stop for a while. Mm-hmm. But yeah. So last episode, Mitchell and I had that lengthy discussion about what are we gonna do if they cancel E3, and then they canceled it before the episode was even up. So that was funny. So, as I said at the top of the last episode in that recorded bit I did after Mitchell and I had our little chit-chat, we're going to make the best of this. We're going to try to have some fun come June. And apparently we're going to try to have some fun in the several months leading up to June, when we're hopefully going to be getting through this weirdness, this cabin fever and paranoia and anxiety and whatever. We're going to get through it together. Everyone just try to stay away from people as best you can. And not us, because we don't count.
Don't touch me. Don't kiss me. Stay back. It's a daily problem.
I'll miss having you on my lap, Jeff. I really will.
Yeah. I know, Hyle. It's okay. We'll get by, and we'll just have to make up for lost time later with more than twice daily lap sittings.
Yeah. We should stream that during E3.
Yeah, this is a fun bit. I think at this point I should clarify I'm not, like, toddler-sized. I maybe painted the picture like I needed to sit on Hyle's lap to reach the... I'm, like, taller than Hyle, maybe.
We're literally the same size, Jeff.
We're the same height, but your eyes are lower than my eyes because you have a taller head.
Okay, I have bigger hair than you do. So
you do have that kind of Kennedy hair. A little bit of a, sort of a Kennedy kind of hair.
Yeah.
So that could explain it.
I also have the bullet hole in my head.
Yeah, that...
So that kind of artificially lowers my eyes a bit.
I didn't realize this is the kind of podcast that I was signing up for. John F. Kennedy was my uncle, so I'm really offended by you right now. Yeah. Uncle John.
You could tell the story about how you went to LBJ's funeral. Or was it? No, Gerald Ford. I did go to Gerald Ford's. I was you weren't
so
even alive when LBJ died.
I was like, okay, what is this bit? What am I not connecting a dot here? When did I go to LBJ's? I didn't. I did go to Gerald Ford's funeral. Dude was dead as hell. He was not alive at all. George Bush was president, but he was not present.
Wait, which George Bush?
George Bush Jr. was president, but he was not present at the funeral. But Dick Cheney...
George W. Bush. He's not a junior.
Yeah, well, juniors... If we're going to get into junior versus senior kind of debates, that would almost be like a segue.
Yeah, because we could talk about Cranky Bush. President Cranky Bush. Remember him?
Yeah. Oh, God, his pubes were just insane.
His stern wife, Wrinkly Bush.
Oh, well, okay. I don't know how long we can keep this going, but you got the idea. It's about pubic hair. The people at home love this bit, and...
Well, now you've got me thinking, Jeff. Like, what would Swanky Bush entail?
I got a funky bush.
Yeah.
Well,
Candy Bush sounds kind of nice. I don't know.
I could go for a little bit of Candy Bush. That almost sounds like a colloquial... slang term for cotton candy. Just call it candy bush.
Right?
Yeah, which I don't actually like. I don't like cotton candy. We almost segued. We got so close to being on track, and then veered, and we're just I don't know where we're at anymore. Something about LBJ's penis. It was
Well, no, his
famously
okay. So
large.
We brought this up on some of the Sea of Thieves streams we've done recently, but LBJ was legendary for his 12-inch penis. And
he had a famously large penis.
Famously large.
The P in POTUS stood for penis back then, yeah.
He would very inappropriately slap it on the Resolute desk and say, that's why, whenever somebody would question a decision he would make. Again, this is not a bit. This is pretty much historical fact. I think it was in one of those National Treasure movies because they had to like lift up his penis to find the treasure map. Remember that?
Yeah, it was there was something involving the founders. I haven't seen that movie. Hyle, you brought me into territory that I haven't seen that movie in a long time. You really took me down a road I wasn't prepared to banter on. Benjamin Franklin was also kind of a sex pervert, right? Because LBJ was also a sex pervert. He made it his goal as president to sleep with the most women he could because he took it as a personal challenge to have sex with more women than John F. Kennedy did. And this is not a bit. This is historical.
It's not a bit.
Facts.
Here's the thing, though. Like, JFK was kind of capped when he got shot in the head. So
he was pretty capped.
The competition should have ended there, unless he was saying my time in office, but then it could only be about 3 years, right?
Right,
so
yeah, and LBJ was president for 5 years. He got to steal a little bit of Kennedy's term, because Kennedy was busy in a hole.
Turns out that was the treasure that they dug up in National Treasure.
There was a small parchment in the hole in Kennedy's head, and you had to find his skull, and then, Donkey Kong, I don't know.
I want to thank everybody tuning in to hear about the future of Donkey Kong. Anyway, so, the conversation obviously won't change because of the coronavirus. We're going to keep carrying on. If one of us catches coronavirus, maybe that will change the equation a bit. But
if I catch it, I'm not going to let it go. I will call the government, and I will try to get the ransom money.
Yeah, it's like the Lindbergh baby.
I think that was in National Treasure, too. Let's keep on brand here.
No, if I catch it, and, I might, I'll still try to do conversations while delirious with a fever. So
if
no
you thought they were good now,
but,
you just wait.
Yeah, just wait until I'm delirious and I don't know what I'm saying. All right. Well, Jeff, in the interest of raising morale, why don't we skip over due diligence? Because I feel like we wasted enough time.
Used enough time for another equally important purpose. I wouldn't like to use the word wasted.
So, the future of Donkey Kong, Jeff. I want to look forward to happier times. I want to look forward to when there will be sun shining, flowers blooming in the meadow, birds chirping, chirp, 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 chirp. That's what they do. And then baby animals skipping about. And us frolicking with them, Jeff. I want to skip forward to when there is warmth and sunshine.
And Donkey Kong video games?
That's really at the epicenter of all of it, right? That's the way we feel whenever there's a new Donkey Kong video game. And it's been over 6 years since Tropical Freeze first came out.
That's
then
right.
For the Wii U, yeah. And in that time, we've only had a Switch port of the game. And in fact, if you look at the math, if you look at the calendars, the star charts, Jeff, in the last decade, we've only had 2 Donkey Kong games, along with each one getting a port for another Nintendo system.
That's less than 5.
It's less than 5. And when you look at what we got during the much maligned quote-unquote buyout era, that period from 2002 to 2010 where Rare went off with Microsoft. Microsoft took Rare as a lover, and they stopped being the primary caretaker of the Kongs. Even then, we had quite a bit to choose from, even if it wasn't necessarily up to everyone's taste and standards. There was quite a bit to choose from, and something for everyone, too. So, it has been a decade of, we got Donkey Kong Country back, but we've actually gotten less Donkey Kong content than we did in the so-called Dark Ages. Now, it hasn't been entirely fruitless this decade, aside from the country games, because while most Donkey Kong fans didn't care, Nintendo did suggest that Donkey Kong be added to Skylanders when I think Activision came to them and said, hey, what characters you got? And Donkey Kong was one of them they suggested back in 2015 because they knew he wouldn't have a game for a while because Tropical Freeze had just come out and Retro was off working on another project. So we got that, and then we also got Donkey Kong Adventure in Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle, and the conversation for that is still coming. I'm sorry. We'll do it. But then, of course, last year, or no, shit, almost 2 years ago this summer, we got the return of. Yeah, we got the return. Well, I mean, it's March, and that happened in August of 2018.
Yeah, no, I forgot it wasn't. I thought it was like 10 months ago. It was actually the year. You're right. It's the year before. It's like the time on the time of it just moves forward. It's not slowing down, Hyle. I don't like it.
Yeah, time might slow down the next few months as we can't leave the house.
Yeah, well, we can't watch the new Fast and the Furious 9. So what are we gonna do?
I don't know how. What's his name? Tokyo Drift came back. What's it? I don't know anything about the movies. I'm sorry. Like the guy who died, and now he's back, and everyone's excited. He was like, "You died. I saw you die in a Tokyo Drift," and he drifted away.
It's because like the latter half of the Fast and the Furious movies have been like all prequels to Tokyo Drift.
Yeah, but they caught up with Tokyo Drift.
I don't remember.
Why do I care about this?
They have a funky timeline.
Yeah, but the new one takes place after that, and he's alive.
I don't know.
And then
don't argue with me about a thing that neither of us know. We don't know.
And the trailer, they were like, "Oh, you're alive."
I haven't seen the day. You've seen the trailer?
I saw the trailer because everybody was like, "Justice for Han." Han is his name. Han, like Harrison Ford,
like a Star Wars.
Yeah, we don't know how he comes back for a year.
We had the return of King K. Rool. He was like our Han.
I thought K. Rool died in Tokyo Drift. What the hell? So, K. Rool came back in Smash, which is a big deal. And I would say that was a big deal for the Donkey Kong franchise, even independent of the hows and whys K. Rool did come back, which was based on his popularity in the ballot. Because when you look at the other Nintendo-owned IPs who had newcomers in Smash Ultimate, all of them are from major current Nintendo IPs, or at least franchises with games currently in development. So Splatoon, we had the Inklings. Super Mario, we had Daisy as an Echo Fighter, Piranha Plant. Metroid, of course, Ridley and Metroid Prime 4 is in development. Animal Crossing, Pokemon, and Fire Emblem, right? And then there's Donkey Kong. And so just looking at that list, it would appear that Donkey Kong is the outlier in that group. Like I said, even ignoring like how K. Rool came to get in the game due to his popularity in the ballot, it's still kind of amazing that Donkey Kong did get a new character. And my argument is maybe that's not so amazing. Now, this episode kind of touches upon stuff we have discussed on and off for the past 2 years on the Kongversation, but it's kind of distilling all of it into one cup. The cup you're drinking out of, Jeff, right now.
My talk
making
water.
That talk juice. Yeah,
it's not talk
water.
Juice.
Sorry,
it's talk water.
I talk juice sounds better to me. Talk water.
You have talk water and you have no juice. They're synonyms, but you don't mix them together into one stupid phrase. Wouldn't make any sense.
Juice is more inherently appealing than water.
Yeah, but liquor is not really that appealing on its own, so it's more like water. Juice implies that it's a cocktail, like a mixed drink.
Yeah, but I mean, it has flavor, and for my water, I have to have it carbonated. What if there's a lockdown and I can't get my carbonated water, Jeff? I refuse to drink it out of the tap. I refuse.
Don't you have one of those machines that can turn any water into carbon water?
It's out of cartridges. I can't make new carbonated water.
Ah, man. How are you going to survive this? Yikes.
I know. This is essentially the apocalypse, right?
Wow. Wowee.
I can't make carbonated water? God, just like Mad Max.
Yeah, just go ahead with the thing about Donkey Kong. I'm going to drink my talk water.
Something is coming for Donkey Kong, Jeff. And I don't think that's a bold proclamation at this point. Like Phil Collins, I can feel it in the air tonight, oh Lord. Was that the line? Was that the line he said?
You know that's the line, but yeah. It's from Donkey Kong Country 2, I think.
I don't want to reveal to the audience that I'm actually in my mid-50s, Jeff. So if I'm going to quote Phil Collins, I have to.
It's a song about he saw the guy not save the guy. So it's like,
well, it's not really about that. It's not really about the drowning person. That's an urban legend.
Well, I didn't know that. I mean, I'm not 50, so.
Yeah, I have to pretend like I don't know what I'm talking about, just like I have to pretend I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to the Fast and the Furious movies.
Oh, you're pretending. Oh,
I'm a big faster. Is that what
fasty? I think they're called fasties.
Fasties, okay. Yeah. I love all the characters. Diesel and
Hot Rod and
Rico and
Rico.
Sebastian.
Yeah, I don't know, man. That's all of them. I've been wondering though, like if you took like all 10 characters from the Fast and the Furious franchise, maybe you take like the top 11 characters, but there's a ban on gatherings of more than 10 people. Who do you cut? You know, how could you pick any one to cut? You really can't cut that cast down to less than 11, and that's why they're gonna not survive.
I would cut Stinky. I don't think.
Oh, come on! He's the only one. He represents she. Sorry.
She is just people don't like Stinky.
No. She represents what brings them all together in the first place, which is because they hate her.
They have to drive fast because they have to get away from the smell.
I'm gonna ask you again to steer these onto topics that I can discuss. That I know the details on. Oh, how about you can grab the car shift handle and slam on the pedal and drift this conversation into, Tokyo style, into some other topic. Steer with the car, automobile stuff. I'm really floundering, Hyle. I don't.
You are, although that's more aquatic. I don't think they've gone under the sea for that franchise yet.
No, you're right.
Unless they did the Hobbs.
Well, there was a submarine in one of those movies. It cracked through the ice in Antarctica. I remember it.
You remember it? Okay. I'll take your word for it, Jeff. And I'll update the Fast and Furious wiki tonight with that information if it's not already on there. In fact, every single one, I'll just add the bit about the submarine.
Every single wiki. Not just the Fast and Furious wiki.
The coronavirus page, just lead with that.
Yeah, just hit the random button on every wiki, and just whatever page you end up on, you better just give it a little edit, a little tweak down in the trivia section on the bottom of the page. The Fast and the Furious gang drove a submarine. All right, go ahead, Donkey Kong.
All right, something's coming for Donkey Kong. So here's what we know thus far. So as you know, I've had an informal yet very persistent source called Dave Throat. Not their real name, but for their protection, Dave Throat. And Dave Throat hasn't really steered me wrong so far, so I trust Dave Throat. Dave Throat told me that Nintendo has plans to make DK a major brand once again. And to do that, they started a couple years ago. And they separated the merchandising of Donkey Kong from the Super Mario license. And they've made the brand its own entity. And this happened a while back, even if we didn't realize it at first. But yeah, all of a sudden, Donkey Kong was being marketed under Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong merchandise. So this doesn't apply to any existing contracts still into effect that was signed before DK was split. So you'll occasionally, but rarely, see new DK merch show up still with the Mario branding. I believe Mattel's Hot Wheels is one of these. They've recently released a Donkey Kong Hot Wheel car under the Super Mario brand, but it's few and far between because usually it's just Donkey Kong that's being licensed now for Donkey Kong merchandise. And this really hit home about a year ago, roughly. The U.S. mall-based store Box Lunch, which is kind of like a geekier version of Spencer Gifts or Hot Topic. They had a big DK merchandising push last year. They even like had a window display for Donkey Kong stuff. It was really surreal and out of nowhere, but it was kind of to celebrate all of these new licensees with the Donkey Kong brand. And it wasn't like toys or anything. It was things like shot glasses and shirts and boxer shorts and things of that nature. But still, like, really weird. And most of it had the Donkey Kong logo on it. So, okay, yeah. And so some stuff is cropped up here or there, but the big thing that kind of took everyone off guard a few weeks back was we got a 2021 Donkey Kong wall calendar coming out. It has a publication date of July 14th of this year. And this is just crazy to see, because this is the kind of thing you would have seen at the height of Donkey Kong Country Mania, like back in the mid-90s. But it's not something you've really seen since then. Donkey Kong and Diddy have been like persistent pages on the annual Super Mario wall calendar. I think up until this last year, because this last year it was an Odyssey themed wall calendar and there's no other things besides what in that game. So yeah, I guess New Donk City, but besides that, there was no Donkey and Diddy on the wall calendar this year. But now we've got a whole Donkey Kong calendar coming out. And Amazon put up the images of at least the front and the back and some of the interior pages. And this is, I think, pretty interesting because we can kind of see what the, maybe not the direction the franchise is taking from this point on, but what is definitely being prioritized. And so this is a wall calendar that's mostly made up of renders from the two Retro Studios games, Returns and Tropical Freeze. There is one Donkey Kong on there that is a Jungle Beat era render, which is totally out of place, but I guess they wanted to use it. But Jeff, I provided images of this calendar for you if you haven't seared it into your brain.
I'm giving it a look-see with my looking eyes. And so you're bringing up, I think you're tiptoeing into a really cool point, which is that the calendar overall is mostly imagery from Donkey Kong Country Returns and Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, minus for one main exception, which is the presence of King K. Rool.
Yes, and so what's kind of humorous is that I think this is the way it works. Because it is a Donkey Kong licensed calendar, they can only use artwork and renders and imagery from the Donkey Kong series. So, the render of K. Rool gets April, by the way. So, in a year and 2 weeks, we all get to put K. Rool up on our walls for the whole month. Oh, happy days. But K. Rool is a render from Jungle Climber, because you would think, well, why wouldn't they use the newest K. Rool artwork, the already iconic image from Smash of him pointing his finger, like, very saucily, like, why wouldn't you use that one? Well, because that's under the Smash Brothers IP. It's not technically a Donkey Kong franchise render, even if it is for a Donkey Kong character. So I think they had to just use artwork produced for the Donkey Kong series because that's what they licensed here. And so the most recent K. Rool render, not including the one from Barrel Blast, which has jet-powered bongos at his feet, is the one from Jungle Climber. So, yeah, like, most of these renders are from Returns and Tropical Freeze, with a Jungle Beat exception. And then we've got K. Rool from Jungle Climber.
This render, I want to point out, is it is a teenager. This render is 13 years old.
Oh, Oh, wow. Yeah, I thought it was depressing when I said Tropical Freeze came out over 6 years ago. But that outdid it right there. Yeah, this render is starting to talk back, starting to develop a moody attitude, it's locking itself in its bedroom. Yeah, fuck this render. This is
A little shit. Ungrateful.
Yeah, right? Learn some respect. I'm in my mid-50s and you don't even
Stop.
You don't even know who Phil
Flossing
Collins
and
is.
playing Fortnite. I don't understand you. Yeet.
So, yeah, that's interesting. So, we should point out who are the other characters on this calendar. Well, we've got a cast photo of the 4 main Kongs from Tropical Freeze. We've got Donkey and Diddy from Returns. We've got Funky from Tropical Freeze. We've got Rambi and Squawks paired together, the 2 main Animal Buddy holdouts. We've got Diddy in his rocket barrel from Returns. We've got some Tux from Tropical Freeze. We've got another posing Donkey and Diddy from Returns. We've got Solo Dixie Kong, which is just the same render as in the group shot, but I guess they didn't have many Dixie renders to work with. The weirdly out of place Jungle Beat Donkey Kong, the Tiki Tak Tribe Priest like Kalimba and the rest, the Tropical Freeze cover art pose of the Kong swinging in on the rope, and you got Lord Frederick too. And I should also point out too that you've got the main image on the months, and then down below it seems like we're gonna have a secondary character there, because on Lord Frederick, who weirdly he's Lord Frederick is October. You think you'd put him in a more winter month, not fucking Halloween? Like, put the Tiki Tak Tribe in Halloween because they're masked. But no, whatever. Like, put me in charge of the calendar. I could do a better job than this at assigning the proper months for the proper characters. But yeah, Lord Frederick's secondary character at the bottom is Bashmaster. Bashmaster Bear, the, I think, fan favorite boss from Tropical Freeze. He likes his ice lollies, and that is his character. And then the secondary character under K. Rool, weirdly enough, is Professor Chops. Finally, K. Rool and Professor Chops are together at last. But yeah, so Jeff, what do you make of this calendar? What does this calendar say to you? Because I don't want to put ideas into your head. You know, I think what I'm thinking.
I think, in my opinion, we're belaboring the calendar because it's just a calendar. I'm not that interested in a 20-minute conversation on a calendar. But I will say, basically, repeat what I said before. Everything is modern Donkey Kong games except for the presence of King K. Rool, and I think it's safe to read into that. Yeah, the resurgence of King K. Rool in Super Smash Brothers, it has already seen ramifications on the Donkey Kong brand itself and how that is going to present itself going forward. And King K. Rool, if you probably the biggest exposure to Donkey Kong as a brand right now is Smash Brothers. And if you get exposed to what that brand is through Smash Brothers, you will come out of it thinking King K. Rool is a major or main character of that franchise, and this calendar shows us that will be true again. That King K. Rool is likely going to remain a fixture of the Donkey Kong brand, of the Donkey Kong IP going forward. So, I mean, I would be shocked. I would be absolutely shocked if a new Donkey Kong game came out, soonish, and King K. Rool wasn't in it. Like, probably the main villain, but, he'll be in it in some capacity is all I would be able to, know for sure. I'd bet good money on it if I had any money. I don't even have bad money.
You don't know.
Yeah, I'm not a betting
man. You work for DKVI.
But, that being said, yeah, it's. I feel pretty confident about that.
Yeah. Yeah, like I always say about Smash, it's the kingmaker, and once you're in Smash, you're set for life, essentially. So, yeah, K. Rool is here to stay, and I would bet anything that K. Rool will be in the next Donkey Kong game. Should I read the calendar description on the back really quick? And
okay,
then we'll
do it, but then I had to say my
back.
thing. I wanted to say my thing, so you say yours, and then I'll do mine.
Okay. So this is the little paragraph that they put on the back of the calendar to entice people to buy the calendar. Smash barrels and surf over foes in this 12-month calendar. Explore the islands with help from heroes Donkey Kong, Diddy Kong, Dixie Kong, Cranky Kong, and wave-shredding Funky Kong from Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze and Donkey Kong Country Returns. This calendar is perfect for new gamers and old fans who want to spend the year with this banana-loving bunch. So it's interesting to me, too, that the calendar is built just exclusively Returns and Tropical Freeze, but we still have to get K. Rool in there.
Well, yeah, and it's telling that when they listed the characters, they say surf over foes and with help from heroes, and they list out the heroes, but they don't mention the villains from Tropical Freeze and Returns, which are on this calendar. They don't say, Donkey Kong, Dixie, etc., and against their foes, Lord Frederick, and the Tiki Chak tribe or whatever from these games. I think the fact that they specifically left those names off the list is so that they didn't have to call attention to the fact that King K. Rool isn't in those games, because they left out all the villains.
This is a sad day for Pan Flute the Tiki.
Yeah, pretty rough going. But what I wanted to say before was this, is that it is interesting, maybe completely meaningless and only interesting to me, but I find it interesting that this previous decade of Donkey Kong, which we already described as kind of sparse, focused entirely around two games, Donkey Kong Country Returns and Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. That's all we had in this previous decade of Donkey Kong. That decade really got off the ground, in my opinion, on the influence of Super Smash Bros. Brawl.
Yeah?
Maybe there would have been a Donkey Kong game regardless of Brawl, but the way that Brawl presented the Donkey Kong IP, like you say, it's the Kingmaker, it not only asserted that, no, you must include Diddy Kong. Diddy Kong is a major main character, but it painted the way that Diddy Kong has been portrayed since, ever since, which is the fact that Diddy Kong's base kit of abilities and equipment and such is to use the peanut pop guns and his jetpack from Donkey Kong 64. It was not always assumed that he would keep those things from Donkey Kong 64, and he's had appearances between then and now where he didn't use that stuff, but because he uses it in Brawl and in Smash Brothers, now it's become standard part of his character. And I think that because of Brawl, he's become a standard character for the franchise, and I think that it really kicked off. And I also compare it to, there was a lot of cooperative 2D platformers on the Wii. Donkey Kong Country Returns was not the first in the trend. You had New Super Mario Bros. Wii, which is a 4-player cooperative side-scroller. You had Kirby's Return to Dreamland, and before that, Kirby Epic Yarn. And Donkey Kong Country Returns is the only one of that era to be a cooperative side-scroller where the player characters don't have collision with each other. In New Super Mario Bros. Wii, if I stand in the same place you are, I have to jump on top of your head, or I push you. In Returns, if you're player 2, Diddy Kong, you phase right through me or walk behind me. We don't occupy the same space. And I could be totally reaching at straws, but I've believed this for years, is that it is inspired by the co-op in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, in the Subspace Emissary. The way that they have the drop in and drop out second player that has no collision with the first player, it plays the same as Returns does. And I've always felt that Returns is pretty heavily inspired by that game. Like the way it represents Donkey Kong and in some other aspects of the gameplay. We owe that decade of Donkey Kong games to Brawl in a way. And I think that we're going to owe the next decade to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, because that is going to set the stage for how Donkey Kong will be portrayed going forward.
And I'm fine with that, because I have honestly nothing but love for Ultimate. Like even at this point, whenever like the final reveal in the first Fighter's Pass was just another Fire Emblem character, couldn't dampen my enthusiasm for it. I was like, okay, whatever. It's still, I still love it. Whatever, just it's completely the opposite from my reactions from Smash 4. So I mean, and Donkey Kong and Diddy and K. Rool and the whole franchise, I think they made off really well in Ultimate, all things considered. So yeah, go ahead, base the next decade off of Ultimate. But besides the calendar, and Jeff, we've already discussed this, because we've got the big Donkey Kong section of Super Nintendo World in Universal Studios' Epic Universe coming up. And hey, remember amusement parks? Remember when they were open?
Oh, crazy. It's a bunch of people in one place.
Ooh,
I barely remember that.
Yeah, if you want to listen to more of Jeff and I talking about that, check out episode 720 of the Kongversation from last August for our take on it. But it's kind of insane when you really stop and consider that they are devoting so much real estate to Donkey Kong. Out of all the characters, out of all the franchises, out of all the brands that Nintendo traditionally focuses on or has focused on in the last 20 years, like, I don't think anybody's assumption, even hardcore Donkey Kong fans who frequent DK Vine or listen to this show, would think, oh yeah, they're going to do a giant Donkey Kong section in their theme park.
Yeah.
But they are.
Yeah, and you know what I'll say about it, which I didn't say on that episode, so it's you get a little fresh take on it. Is that I think that it's easy for people who listen to podcasts about video games to maybe not be able to step back and look at the wider perspective of, you know, what does it mean to have a section of a theme park? What it really means is that is reaching a level of mainstream penetration that video games rarely see. So if you are listening to this podcast, it means you love video games and you are a video gamer, so to speak. But the average person on the Joe, the average Joe, I use the word gamer. I hate that, but
so to speak. Copyright 2020, Jeff Onan.
The point being, video games on the whole are pretty niche still in terms of what is mainstream. When you are making an amusement park, I mean, you want to have you want to have an Iron Man, right? You want to have Iron Man. You don't want to have a video game. Like the penetration of pop culture consciousness that movies currently occupy is still significantly greater than any kind of individual video game outside of stuff like Mario. And now
Pokemon.
What we're seeing, Pokemon. And what we're seeing is that Nintendo thinks Donkey Kong is big enough a brand to stand alongside, you know, things like Iron Man or Harry Potter or any other major, you know, pop culture brand. This is saying that it's not just big among Nintendo IP, but it is big among human culture.
And projected to be big too. Like, even if it's not necessarily big at the moment, there will be a tipping point, especially when it has practically a third of Super Nintendo World dedicated to it. And you know, it's funny you mentioned Iron Man, because I was just thinking, well, yeah, Iron Man is a big fucking deal now, but I remember 2008, before the movie came out, Iron Man was nothing. Like,
I should have said Spider-Man. That's a pretty universal, like, always been a major success.
Iron Man is now. Iron Man is now because it got a movie that people really liked, and then from that movie they built a whole cinematic universe around it. But my point is, just because a character is obscure to the mainstream, and I wouldn't say Donkey Kong is obscure to the mainstream, at the very least people know the arcade game. Like, that's
no, I think
ubiquitous.
As far as video game characters go, Donkey Kong is up there. My point is that Nintendo is acknowledging that by saying that this is they think that this is a safe investment, that people will have an interest in this, but they also are, it's kind of a chicken and an egg. On the one hand, it has to be big for them to do this. On the other hand, them doing this is going to make it big. And,
exactly.
You know, you got both. You got you got butter on both sides of the bread.
Oh, that's so hard to eat. How do you do that?
You hold it by the crust edges. And then Hyle, you try it on your own time. Although I personally couldn't get a loaf of bread this morning at the grocery store. There's nothing left.
Yeah, I mean that's just risky business to me, Jeff, because it's like you're holding it by the sides, and it's just inviting the opportunity to drop it, and then you drop it and it's over. It's all over because it's gonna, no matter which side it falls on, it's gonna be butter side down. And
Counterpoint is you're wrong, and that. The point being, if it falls down and it's butter side down, you still have a good side you can eat. Whereas normally...
No, are you going to rip that side off, or are you going to lick that side?
Slice it even thinner, and throw out the bad side and you have a good side. Still has butter on it.
So much work. That's so much work, Jeff. Oh,
if you're not willing to eat bread off the floor, then what are we here for? What is the point of all of this?
What we should do is, because everybody's going to be going stir crazy, we should probably have the DK Vine dual buttered bread challenge. Well, see how fast
on Twitter
people can eat.
Social media. Okay, I see your strategy.
Right? Yeah, and then it's like people are like, "What does this have to do with Donkey Kong?"
Are we on TikTok?
Don't worry about it.
I think we're going to get on TikTok for this. Someone's going to TikTok this.
You have to be dressed as TT for that. You have to dress up as a little stopwatch boy.
Oh, shit. I just got my hair cut like Trophy Thomas. I thought, I had it backwards. No.
You did.
I blue. My hair's blue. I look like goddamn ninja. All right. So, anyway, butter on the bread. Donkey Kong's getting an amusement park. It's cool.
It's cool. And it shows that Nintendo has big plans. Big plans for Donkey Kong. And some of that is also like the wishes and the wants of one Shigeru Miyamoto. We know he wants Donkey Kong taken care of. Donkey Kong is his baby. Even if like the modern Donkey Kong was more Rare's baby, you still trace back the lineage. That it was Miyamoto's seed that fertilized that egg. You know what I mean? So
he's like a grandpa.
He's yeah, something like that. Yeah,
he's
I mean,
like
he
grandpa.
Yeah. What?
I don't know. I don't know that voice. I was doing a grandpa voice. Grandpa.
Protect your grandpas, people, because they're gonna get sick harder.
Just protect
Hashtag
everyone.
coronavirus.
I think protect all your people.
Protect all your people, and well, we found out dogs can't catch it. That's good, because for a while there, they thought dogs could catch it. WoW merchandise and damn near an entire theme park, they're great things for Donkey Kong fans, but it's basically butter without the bread, right? It's nothing without a major game. And back in early 2018, Dave Throat told me that what was going on with Tropical Freeze for Switch and Donkey Kong Adventure for Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle was just the first phase for Nintendo's plans for Donkey Kong. And I assume that K. Rool was the next phase, or maybe part of the phase, or some sort of phase. K. Rool was part of it in Smash, but that still begs the question: what is this building up to? If there are phases, and I think it's time, Jeff, that we sit down and we give some hard predictions that will make us look foolish when they're inevitably wrong.
Right,
but
because people think we know all this stuff. People think we're keeping it a secret. We don't know much more. We tell you what we know. You've told everyone what Dave Throat told you just now. You just heard it. Rewind. And, we really don't know the details. We know the bread, but we don't know the butter.
We know the butter, we don't know the bread.
We know that the toaster is on, but we don't know what's going to pop out of it. It could be a Pop-Tart. Could be toaster strudel.
Could be a Pop-Tart. Can I just go on a rant about Pop-Tarts, Jeff?
I think I've heard this rant before, because you only have like 6 that you kind of cycle through. And, maybe don't. Maybe you can't go on that rant.
About how Pop-Tarts aren't vegetarian friendly unless you get the Pop-Tarts that don't have the frosting on it.
You gotta have no frosting on them. Because there's a vegetable in the frosting. Or you're not allowed to eat vegetables.
No, there's gelatin in the frosting, and I can't eat gelatin.
Wouldn't that make you a gelitarian? Then? Anyway, so long story short, we're going to talk about predictions. We're going to talk a little bit about that whole Donkey Kong video game thing that should be the backbone of all of this. Calendars are not great. I can, what's great about a calendar is if everyone at the grocery store bought 40 packs of toilet paper and you're out, you can wipe yourself up with a calendar. But it doesn't put a game in my Switch and give me hours of joy. And
plus you only have 12 pages.
Right, so it will only last one poop. So we need to get into that. What is the backbone of all of this? It should be games. Platformers, not even Smash Brothers. Smash Brothers is a game, but we're talking about Donkey Kong platformers. And what do we want to see? What do we expect to see? And we're going to be wrong on a lot of it because we don't know.
Oh, we're going to be so wrong.
But we're going to take some shots.
We actually started our predictive ways back on the season 7 finale of the Kongversation, where we say, let's look forward ahead to 2020 and see what's going to happen. And we didn't say coronavirus. Even though we should have seen that coming, but we talked a little bit about Donkey Kong and some hopes and soft predictions, but I say we go hard with the predictions right now, Jeff. I say we go all in and put our credibility on the line with the caveat that we're going to be wrong. These are just educated guesses. We're trying to read as best we can what is actually happening, and we're going to do that by looking at the evidence so far. So we'll laugh when it comes out that we're wrong, and because we're idiots, Jeff.
My money is on Donkey Kong 65.
I think the DK Vine vernacular for that for so long was Donkey Kong 64, what was it, 64 2-ish, but we do know this, okay, or I know this from Dave Throat, from off of Dave Throat. Nintendo wanted a stable home for Donkey Kong, which it hasn't had really since Rare. Because Rare was able to churn out DK games sort of like Kirby is churned out now. And just a continual stream of DK games. There was rarely a big drought when it came to Donkey Kong under Rare. And they continue to expand and evolve their output, rather than limiting DK to just one thing. Near the end of Rare's tenure, they were going to branch out beyond just platformers and racers. We were going to have a puzzle game, even if Coconut Crackers was not even going to see release pre-buyout, but they were getting adventurous with Donkey Kong, and their handheld team was going all in on different concepts for it. So that was kind of the golden age for Donkey Kong. And then since 2002, and when Microsoft took Rare as a lover, as I like to say, apparently, 4 different studios handled the Donkey Kong franchise during the so-called buyout era. Nintendo EAD Tokyo did Jungle Beat. Namco did the Donkey Konga series. Payon had the Pegging games and Barrel Blast. And then there was still Rare. Rare was doing the handheld remix of the Country Trilogy, and then they did Diddy Kong Racing DS. So it's actually 5 studios, too, if you count Nintendo Software Technology Corporation, or NST, because they developed the Mario vs. Donkey Kong series, but I don't really count that as a Donkey Kong series. It's just Mario series with Donkey Kong kind of in it. But whatever, I don't want Gibbon to yell at me, so I won't say it. Oops, I said it. But 2010 onward then, Retro revived the Country series. And so you might be saying, well, yeah, Donkey Kong has had a stable home. It's been Retro Studios. Well, Retro only developed 2 core games in the span of a decade. And I'm not belittling that. I'm not saying
Retro Studios and the word stable don't exactly go that well together historically.
Oh, I'm not belittling their output, because I very much like Country Returns. I very much love Tropical Freeze. But, it was always kind of this feeling with Retro that they were going to develop Donkey Kong games for a little while. They're going to do the first one. They're going to do a sequel, even though we were already, like, I remember before Tropical Freeze came out, we were saying, like, oh, Retro's probably done with Donkey Kong now. We're not going to get a sequel from them. And then Tropical Freeze sort of blindsided us just a bit. But egg on our face, butter on our face, as opposed to
butter on our bread. Yeah.
Oh.
Sorry. Bread.
Yeah.
But we were wrong, because they did make another Donkey Kong Country game after that.
But, you know, 2 games in 10 years. Okay, so Monster did the port of Returns 3D. Retro themselves handled the Switch version of Tropical Freeze. But, you know, any hopes that they could take over the reins in a manner similar to Rare did, it evaporated over time, like a Thanos snap in front of Iron Man's friends. Remember that?
Yeah, because he's only allowed to have a gathering of 10 people maximum.
Yeah,
and so they were like, hey, "Sorry, Black Widow, you're gonna get pushed off a cliff now."
Well, no, that happened after the Thanos snap. Jeff, don't you know the history?
Time is only linear for regular people. I see it all. I see it all. Like
I forgot.
Beginning, middle, end. I'm a centipede. I'm a 4-dimensional centipede.
Yeah, that's... Man, the Human Centipede series really got weird. Starting with Tokyo Drift.
Yeah, it did. But Monster, they didn't take the reins. We thought Monster might get to make more games after they made the port. They did not.
No, because they did a really good job with Returns 3D. Like, everyone really liked those levels they cooked up themselves. And so we were like, oh man, Monster, what they could do is they could take over the Donkey Kong Country series after Tropical Freeze, sort of like how a different team internally at Rare handled Donkey Kong Country 3. And that would be like a cool thing to do. That would be thematically similar. And I think we would all be satisfied with that. You know, give us Donkey Kong Country Baja Blast Monster. But then they just became this studio that like makes licensed NASCAR games. And you know, there's not even any NASCAR, Jeff, because all sports are canceled. So they should just stop making NASCAR games.
Even the cars aren't fast enough to outdrive it's a fast virus. The cars can't outrun it. And so that is why Monster should make a new Donkey Kong game. Monster games.
Not like Diesel and Sebastian outran Stinky.
Was that in Fast 5? That was my favorite. And Retro obviously moved on after Tropical Freeze, because we now know that they're actually working on Metroid Prime again. Yeah.
There's a whole sort of story there of internal difficulties since Tropical Freeze's release. Tanabe, they like got away from Tanabe. Now Tanabe's back because he was heading up Metroid Prime 4 away from Retro, and then that went tits up. And then so Nintendo was like, just have Retro do it. And so now Tanabe is back with Retro, and they're doing Metroid Prime 4, and no Donkey Kong game.
Yeah.
And now they were never going to do another Donkey Kong game after Tropical Freeze. Like, I don't think that was ever in the cards, aside from the Switch port. And any features they might have wanted to add to it that they didn't get to. But New Funky Mode was the extent of their relationship with Donkey Kong post-Tropical Freeze. So I think it's unlikely, and I definitely don't think Nintendo is waiting for them to make another Donkey Kong game. I think Nintendo wants Donkey Kong to have a stable home. I think they've already settled on what that home is. And it's kind of ironic because Nintendo, they weren't waiting for Retro to make a Metroid Prime game, a Metroid Prime 4, so they, had it developed outside of Retro, and now Retro is making Metroid Prime 4. But I think the DK project away from Retro is going to go a lot smoother than the original iteration of Metroid Prime 4. Anyway, here's why I think that. Here's what I think is happening. So I believe, and this is just a hunch, this isn't me like being tee-hee-hee, my source told me this. This is just what I think. looking at all the evidence, I have a strong feeling Nintendo is developing Donkey Kong internally at Nintendo EPD, the successor to Nintendo EAD, since 2015. I don't have any concrete evidence for this, but here's my thinking. If something for Donkey Kong is in development and we haven't heard about it, and all the usual suspects that you would think would make a Donkey Kong game, all the names bandied about for the last decade, if they're all occupied with known projects, and we know Nintendo wants to give DK the same stability it once had way back when, well, where else are they going to do it other than themselves? So I think that's where they've gone to make Donkey Kong a priority, is Nintendo EPD.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think that a lot of people online will tell you, oh, there's no Donkey Kong game coming because who would be making it? This team's busy on this, and this other company's doing this, and this is going on this. And I think that you severely underestimate how unpredictable these things are. There's always more companies. There's always more teams. There's like they can form new teams. And then they're like, hey, we've been working on in secret with a new team. Like nobody heard of the team that was working on Metroid Prime 4 before that went kind of kablooey and they switched over to Retro Studios. Point is, that's not a good argument. You're not going to say Donkey Kong's not being made because there's no team to do it, or it just means that you don't have much of an imagination. I think that the best bet would be it's something internal in a team that is forming around Donkey Kong to make it like their entire priority. Or
I agree.
I could see it being a team that is kind of splitting priorities. So an example is, I'm going to get this wrong now because I'm on the spot and I didn't do any research, but I believe...
You only have the Fast and Furious wiki up.
I believe that the team that makes Splatoon is also the team that makes Animal Crossing. And I believe that the team that makes Mario Kart is also the team that made the game ARMS. And I could see an arrangement where a team has like a divided attention working on, alternating between two big projects of two different franchises in the way that Splatoon and Animal Crossing share a home. I could see that. Or alternatively, I could see an entire team that's just, this is the Donkey Kong team. They work on Donkey Kong all the time. And that's probably most likely what will happen, because I think that it's the kind of thing where Nintendo wants stability and they want direct investment and direct oversight in a way that is different than them going and saying, hey, Namco Bandai, do you want to make a Donkey Kong game? Or like, hey, Camelot, do you want to make a Donkey Kong game? Having it in-house would be congruent. It would be in keeping with what we know about how big a priority they are making it. So that's my thought. Now, there's other teams that could make a good Donkey Kong game. Like I mentioned Camelot. I didn't mention, but I will mention Next Level Games, although they just finished up Luigi's Mansion 3. Like this idea that if Retro's not making it, then nobody's making it because nobody can do it is stupid. Ubisoft Milan could do a great Donkey Kong game if they wanted to. And yeah, we could get a brand new team within the Nintendo framework that could be working on it.
Here's the thing. When you look at all of these properties that Nintendo EPD kind of manages, handles, develops for, you got Zelda, you've got Mario, Star Fox, but then you've got Splatoon, Animal Crossing. Like these are prime modern day Nintendo franchises. If they want Donkey Kong to be among that echelon, that's where it's going to be. And I have a strong hunch that is indeed what is happening and has been happening under our noses for a while. We know many of the younger hands at Nintendo EPD are big fans of Donkey Kong Country, or Super Donkey Kong as they would know it. So this wouldn't even be like if they were developing it. I've already seen, because there's speculation out there that this is happening, independent of what's coming from us. And I've seen some concern like, well, I wouldn't want them to handle it because that's essentially the people who did Jungle Beat. And, you could say what you want. And like, yeah, if Jungle Beat's a quality game, sure, but it didn't have any of the characters or concepts that I love. It was just Donkey Kong and the banana, ha ha ha. But this wouldn't be a Jungle Beat situation. People are misreading that because people misread what Jungle Beat was to begin with. Jungle Beat only reinvented things because it was so tonally different from past Donkey Kong games. And it was a period in the Donkey Kong franchise where a lot of people felt like they could reinvent it or change up how it was under Rare for almost a decade before. Now Donkey Kong is at a different point as a franchise. And you don't necessarily want to reinvent it. You want to give it that stability. You want to celebrate aspects of it that maybe have fallen by the wayside because it hasn't had a stable home. And you look at the way they've homaged Donkey Kong in the last few years, and you can kind of get the sense of what they would definitely pull from characters, concepts. It would very much be based around Donkey Kong Country. A little bit of retros, a little bit of rares, I think. I think that K. Rool's back for good in some form or fashion. I don't think we're going to get a Donkey Kong game without K. Rool in it. I think he's like Diddy Kong at this point. He's going to be there, hell or high water. And I think it's almost worth studying some things like the Easter eggs and references in Odyssey. If this prediction is true, we could maybe see who the team or the people adjacent to the team, what characters they kind of have a shining to, and maybe glean from that who might make an appearance going forward. You know what I'm saying? Like, this isn't completely scientific, so I'm not saying like, yes, it is confirmed that Radley would be in the next Donkey Kong game, but what it tells you is when they reference Radley, it doesn't mean he'll show up in the next game. It means that the powers that be or the people that are at Nintendo in these teams would not be against pulling things from Donkey Kong Country 2 as an example. So you can at least pull that like large level truth out of that and say, it wouldn't just be Donkey Kong Country's bare bone cast, which is what Returns had but even less than the whole cast. But Returns didn't pull anything from any game post Donkey Kong Country. This game, if this whatever new game comes out, probably would, especially because we had Dixie Kong already in Tropical Freeze. I don't think she's going away. So the Smash Ballot, Tropical Freeze came out before the Smash Ballot, right? The Smash Ballot changed some perceptions among the old guard at Nintendo. So some of the barriers we had up, like, do we really need to use this character? Well, this wasn't really our character. There is a lot of that, like, mentality, that culture at Nintendo. Like, certain teams have their characters, and because essentially the Donkey Kong team was Rare, there is this kind of like, we'll use some of the bigger characters, but we really want to do our own thing, make it your own, what the ballot did was it showed a lot of people at Nintendo, oh my god, like, these characters are popular. There is a hardcore fan base for this property and some of these IPs that we haven't actually been servicing, and maybe we should fix that. K. Rool coming back was the first big salvo in that. I think we're going to see some more returning characters going forward. And again, like, I don't know. I'm not like hinting at anything like, oh yeah, wait till that Squidder game drops in 2021. But it is, I think, a new day that's dawning for Donkey Kong. And this isn't the buyout era. This isn't even the returns era. This is, I think, going to be the best era for Donkey Kong fans since Rare was with Nintendo.
And I'll tell you this: if you have anxiety or reservations over the idea of a internal studio in Japan at Nintendo making a Donkey Kong Country game or a Donkey Kong IP game, yes, prepare for the possibility that it is somewhat trimmed down in the way that Retro's games were, and that it's not going to necessarily be as much of a lore and character fest as the Rare games were. Be prepared for that possibility. But let me tell you what the biggest remedy for a bare bones cast is: a sequel, and a sequel to a sequel, and a sequel to that sequel. And the fact is that Donkey Kong having a home that makes games and doesn't think like, well, we made a Donkey Kong game. That's this generation satisfied. That's this decade satisfied. Let's move on to something else. If we had a dedicated studio making Donkey Kong games, you'll be shocked at how a game every 3 years, just as an example, could expand on what they're willing to reference and what they're willing to bring back. And you look at what Kirby has done. In the same decade that Donkey Kong Country returned, you had a return of the kind of classic style Kirby 2D platformer, which is Kirby's Return to Dreamland. Came out, I believe, the same year as Returns, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it's 2011. The point being that in that following decade, that where we only got 2 games out of Retro, Kirby got 4 main platformers and like 5, side games or something. And by the end of it, you had the Switch game, the Kirby Star Allies, with DLC packs, and every DLC was adding in a handful of like 3 to 5 niche classic Kirby characters referencing a particular game. It'd be like the equivalent of Tropical Freeze having a DLC that was like, well, here's Tiny, Chunky, and Lanky as playable characters, and then the next DLC is adding in, Kiddy Kong and Brash Bear, and I don't know. They really,
of course, you had to get Brash Bear in there.
Yeah, he's the Brothers Bear, which is best. But my point is that a dedicated studio that is the home of an IP, creating sequels that build on their own work at a regular interval, is the remedy to the bare-bonedness, the basicness of anyone's interpretation of what is Donkey Kong Country. And that's why Tropical Freeze is so much better than Returns. It's so much better than Returns. And that if Retro had done a third one, it would be even more involved in terms of bringing back characters and things, and that's what you need. You need sequels, and to get sequels, you need a home with a stable team that is just that's their job. Donkey Kong is their baby,
because that has been the biggest hindrance, I think, for the Donkey Kong series getting any momentum post Rare, and that's because every time a new studio takes it over, it's essentially a soft reboot. And it's like starting over again, wiping a slate clean. And it's just impossible to build from there. And so it's like every time we get a new Donkey Kong game that's not a direct sequel, it's like we're starting from square one. Yeah. And so all these characters we want to see, all this returning lore. No, you're just going to get like the very, very basics. At the very least, you'll get Donkey Kong. If you're lucky, you might get Diddy and a Rambi and a Cranky in there. But yeah, so
I think that you look at other platformers, if Kirby can do it with a dedicated studio home, if Sonic the Hedgehog can do it, even though those games aren't usually very good these days, anyone who thinks that you can't get regular Donkey Kong sequels, they're not dreaming big enough. If Kirby can do it, we can do it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the intention is for Donkey Kong to be even higher than Kirby as far as the pecking order goes. Not that there's a pecking order, but there's a pecking order. And
I mean, the only reason Kirby is there is because they have a team. They have a studio.
Yeah. Had Kirby not had a team and had something weird happen where they just stopped making Kirby games, Kirby could have fallen down to the level of F-Zero or Earthbound, where it's referenced in Smash Brothers, and that's all you're gonna get. and the fact that they never let Donkey Kong or Donkey Kong Country fall to that level shows that Nintendo and forces within Nintendo have had an investment in it, but they're just committing to it now, finally, that, okay, we need to give it the stability that it needs after almost 20 years of being in the wilderness. It's time. So, and they wouldn't be making all of these monetary investments in it if that wasn't the plan, right? So, anyway, yeah, I'm glad we're pretty much on the same page, Jeff, because I was thinking I was going to give my prediction, and then you were going to say, Hyle, you're full of shit.
Well, you didn't give much of a detailed prediction other than who might be making the game. We haven't really talked about what would the game be. I guess we have talked about the kinds of characters we'd expect to see and the kind of general atmosphere that we'd expect to be. We both agree. You're going to see K. Rool. We both agree. It's probably internally developed at Nintendo. We both agree that it's probably going to be taking after Donkey Kong Country more than anything else. But, if we want to get into nitty gritty, like, what, is this going to be a 2D platformer even? Who knows where we'd go from there? But there's only so many hours.
That's why I thought we would take the calls we got.
Oh, we've got calls.
Because I'm sure they bring this up, right? And then we'll give our final thoughts about what we think the next Donkey Kong game will be. You see, we're setting it up, and then we're going to end on that.
All right, let's do it. Let's do some calls. Telephone.
Let's do
calls.
Some calls. Telephone machine. Just don't touch the receiver.
Hands-free.
Is that what it's called on those old phones?
Hands-free handset.
Yeah.
Headset. Handset? Receiver? It's the dongle-y. What do you... it's funny though, that cell phones don't have that you used to have the landline with the big banana you'd have to pick up and put the banana to your ear.
Right.
Whatever you call that, the banana part. And cell phones aren't shaped like that banana, but they still use the picture of that as the symbol on the app when you want to make a phone call. Pretty crazy. Like, the email is represented by an envelope. Nobody uses envelopes.
Well, this is some great observational humor, Jeff.
The times. All right, let's take a phone call.
Let's take it.
Hello again, Kongversation. It is Kevin Folgers here, and it appears that I will be doing a follow-up call to what was the 2020 New Year's predictions. Now, I previously had suggested the idea that Nintendo EPD do Donkey Kong, and I'm fully confident that the eventual next Donkey Kong game will be handled by them. There were suggestions that studios such as Next Level Games would do it, and while I think that Next Level Games would do a fantastic job, they'd only do one game and dip. Right now, Donkey Kong needs a dedicated in-house studio to sort of rebuild the brand, and I feel like the best way to do that is internally. I'm not saying Next Level Games wouldn't do a good job. They definitely would. But, and I also suggested it was the 3D Mario team, but I almost think that there could be a merge of different members of the EPD division that will come together to form a kind of a DK team. There was an interview talking about how 10 members of the Splatoon team were pulled to work on Animal Crossing. And then there's the question of whether it'll be 2D or 3D. I suggested 3D. I think 3D is just going to sell better. I think that 2D would not be as well received and wouldn't sell as well. I mean, Yoshi's Crafted World didn't sell very well. But I think the benefit of, if it could be a 2D game, is that it could continue to explore unique level archetypes instead of revisiting the ones that, while they haven't been interpreted since DK64, are pretty tired within the series as a whole, like Jungles, Mines, Factory, and Snow. If it were 2D, I'd like to see more cinematic set pieces, maybe even a return to Crocodile Isle, which is another thing. I think the Kremlings and K. Rool are probably, most definitely, absolutely 110% coming back. But there comes the question of what about the extended Kong cast? I think we're likely to see Candy, Lanky, and Tiny. Maybe they'll overcorrect from the ballot and bring everyone back. Who knows? I think Kitty and Chunky are most likely going to stay dead. I think Miyamoto's kind of got this gameplay first idea, and Nintendo wants to push the idea of Donkey Kong being the biggest, baddest brute of them all. And so that's just my further interpretation of EPD doing Donkey Kong, should they be the ones to do it, and I think they will do. Maybe the Donkey Kong Country games are being held for on NSO for a coincide release on the NSO for marketing. Anyways, have a good one, guys.
Thank you, Kevin Bulger / Kevin Folgers. Bad coffee. Jeff, what do you have to make of that call?
Well, it's the best part of waking up.
It's the best part of brother and sister incest. Remember that?
Remember that? I think I don't know how. I don't really know how mainstream that is outside of the fact that I have DK Viners share that video with me every Christmas. So if you don't know about it, just Google incest. I'm sure it's the top result. So he touched on a number of good topics there. A lot of stuff we already mentioned that we agreed on.
Yeah.
He kind of, so it sounded like it was a response to what we talked about on the New Year's episode that I was on, and talking about that Next Level Games, if they made a game, it would be good, but they wouldn't be a permanent home for the studio. And I don't know what I said on that episode. Not only do I not commit anything to memory, but I don't do research for the new episodes I'm on. So I'll say this, is that if I said I thought it would be Next Level, I've pretty much changed my mind for the same reason, that I think that Nintendo is most likely trying to invest in an internal full-time Donkey Kong team. And so that's where my headspace is in today, you know, and that's maybe different than 3 months ago. Maybe it'll be different in 3 months from now. Maybe video games will be canceled. But we'll see. The other thing he brought up, though, and I'm curious about your thoughts on this, is that he thinks a 3D Donkey Kong game would sell better than a 2D one. What are your thoughts?
So here are my thoughts, Jeff, on the subject matter that you just referenced from Kevin's call. I think 2D would be a bit weird. I think just having a straight 2D platformer would be a bit weird. And that's just because it would feel like they're just picking up where Retro left off. And I don't think that would be Nintendo EPD style. So inevitably you're going to have comparisons to what they did. So are they just going to like tweak Donkey Kong Country yet again for a different studio? I don't necessarily think so. What a 3D platformer, I'm not sure either. I could see a 3D platformer almost before I could see a 2D platformer. Not that I'm discounting the possibility of a 2D platformer, because I feel like that is Donkey Kong's bread and butter at this point. But I think there is enough demand and nostalgia for 3D platforming Donkey Kong, at least the Donkey Kong 64 crowd, you know, the people who grew up with that game. That was their first Donkey Kong game. A lot of people got that Jungle Green N64 bundle, so like that was their game, their Donkey Kong. And you know, we could argue about the quality of it all night long, but I think that there is enough nostalgia and goodwill, at least because of that, that people are hungry more for a 3D Donkey Kong than they are a 2D Donkey Kong. But then would that just step on Super Mario Odyssey's toes? Like, how would you do it differently? How would you make a different enough product that it isn't just a reskinned Mario game? And obviously Donkey Kong is totally different than Mario. You know, could have a different style of gameplay, but it would still be a dicey proposition for the same studio to make it, right?
Right. So where I'm standing on this is, I don't necessarily agree with the premise that a 3D game will sell better than a 2D game. The example given was that Yoshi's Crafted World didn't sell well on the Switch. You know, Donkey Kong games have always outsold Yoshi games. Yoshi is, I don't want to say Yoshi is niche, because there's a couple of Yoshi games that are some of the all-time great games. But, you know, look, Donkey Kong Country outsold Yoshi's Island. Donkey Kong 64 outsold Yoshi's Story by like 10 times or so, or something like that. Well, okay, maybe not quite that much, but it outsold it considerably, and that's not even counting like Diddy Kong Racing, also on the N64. That didn't bring into account Donkey Kong Country 2 and 3 and how big their sales were. Yoshi was on the Wii U, right? The Yoshi's Woolly World, that did not sell as well as Tropical Freeze. Yoshi's Crafted World, which is a completely original sequel to that game and is on the Switch, it sold less than the port of Tropical Freeze on the Switch, which is just a port. So I don't think Yoshi proves that 2D platformers can't sell well. And I've been talking to kind of stall for time because I wanted to pull up stats on the Mario sales. And it does look like Mario Odyssey outsold the 2D Mario Brothers Deluxe by a considerable margin. Although, again, that was just a port, and Mario Odyssey is a brand new game. And Mario Maker also is selling really well. So I don't know. I think there's room on the Switch. You have multi-million dollar sellers that are 2D. You have multi-million dollar sellers that are 3D. I don't think sales are going to come into it in terms of... I don't think they will have any crisis of confidence on which version of the game they can sell. I think that if they want to make a 2D platformer and they are inspired and have an idea for how that could work, they'll make it. And I think that if they have an idea, this is kind of touching on what Hyle said about how do we differentiate this from Odyssey? What kind of 3D game is this going to be? If they have an idea for that, they'll make that. And I think they'll push either one and make it sell well by means of marketing and the fact that Donkey Kong is just a better brand, just a better brand marketing-wise than Yoshi is. So yeah, that's where I'm at. I think it could go either way. I don't know if I have a preference either way. I think that if you do a 2D game, I'd love to see them expand on kind of some of the 3D aspects that Tropical Freeze tiptoed into. And I think there's still a lot you can do in the mostly 2D realm. But if they do a 3D game, then honestly, the possibilities, the sky is the limit in terms of what you can do, because that genre has been so seldom revisited in the modern day. And yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of 3D platforms out there. I think Donkey Kong, there's a million ways you could do one.
Yeah.
I would love to be running around in a jungle field on top of Rambi the Rhino, just charging through HD jungle fields, like you see the jungle off in the background. There's a mountain and a waterfall, and just the openness of a 3D environment excites me. But I think that you are going to have a lot of Donkey Kong Country fans also that feel the opposite, in that the tightness of a 2D platformer in gameplay is what the satisfying side-scrolling action is what makes Donkey Kong Country good. You're going to have people of two minds about that.
And, maybe there's a middle ground. The idealistic, or what we say now would be the ideal version of Donkey Kong 64, had it been able to work, was, the kind of Crash Bandicoot style, vague Crash Bandicoot style, where it's kind of structured like a 2D platformer, but with 3D levels. I don't know. Maybe that's a middle ground that would just please no one. But
here's one. I've brought this comparison up before that I think that on first hearing it, it's going to sound wild, but if you dig a little deeper, there's a little bit of sense to it. I am a big fan of the Lego brand games that are licensed. I'm talking Lego Star Wars, Lego Harry Potter, Lego Jurassic World, etc. And there are aspects of the way those games are structured. Lego Batman is another good example. So especially the newest ones are structured in a way where they have an overworld that is kind of open world. Like Lego Batman, for example, you have a completely open Gotham that you can explore and find stuff to do all around Gotham. But then from that overworld, you enter into levels that are separate from that overworld, like you're stepping into a level, and those levels have they have drop in and drop out co-op, which I think is vital in a Donkey Kong game, in a Donkey Kong Country game. I want co-op.
Oh yeah.
2, they have a large cast of characters. Some of them are necessary for this one mission. Like they'll play a level, and you got to have these characters because they're part of the story. And then you're encouraged to go and replay that level in a kind of creative mode where you've got access to any characters you've unlocked, and they have a cast of hundreds of characters. There's aspects of the way they do that I think could apply to having a multitude of playable Donkey Kong characters, because in the traditional Nintendo style, 2 characters that play similarly wouldn't exist. You wouldn't have both Dixie Kong and Tiny Kong. And in the Lego games, you have stuff like that, and they do it in a way that I think makes sense to implement it. And then the other thing is that, so there's the overworld is 3D and open world. The levels in those games are more linear, and you could, in the Donkey Kong example, make them side-scrollers, or you could make them more like three-dimensional hallways, whether that's from a back-on perspective like Crash Bandicoot, or a side-on perspective like the Lego games do it. Well, sometimes they're back on and sometimes they're side on. But the point is, you're moving through 3D hallways. Yeah, I think a lot of the way they structure those games could work for how I'd like a Donkey Kong game to play. And, maybe that's the compromise they want. And like you said, maybe you'll just end up with a really janky overworld and a really janky levels because you weren't focused on one or the other. I don't know. Video games are tough, Hyle.
Janky Kong would be a good new addition.
Janky Bush.
I like what you touched upon, though. Not the bush, but
was that bush before we went live, or did that happen on the episode?
Oh, that happened on the episode,
good.
baby.
I didn't want the janky bush
okay.
to just sound like I'm having a weird breakdown.
No, you touched upon having many, many characters playable, and I think that is actually an important aspect that needs to be recognized for Donkey Kong. It's I think the biggest stumbling block we had mentally for a game like Jungle Beat is historically Donkey Kong Country fans, going forward, we've been attracted to a large cast of characters because Donkey Kong games are not just about Donkey Kong, they're about a community of friends and family coming together to achieve a common purpose. So I think that would be an important aspect of whatever they're doing to give us lots of options. And,
you know what I think it's emblematic of Donkey Kong is that when you talk about any other protagonist and their allies, you refer to them as Mario and friends. But when you do it for Donkey Kong, it's the Kong family. Yeah. And it's a family. It's a different, totally different thing.
Retro was getting it right with Tropical Freeze. You could say, well, I don't like how in single player, the other Kongs just rode on Donkey Kong's back, and I'll agree with you there. But, they were getting it right with Tropical Freeze, at least, is bringing in Dixie and having a playable Cranky, and then eventually having a playable Funky. I like that. I want to see that continue. I don't want to just go back to square one and have Donkey and Diddy. I mean, if we get that and that's all we get, fine. That's fine, because like you said, it's all about the sequel, and if we can have Donkey Kong have a stable home, then it's all about just what's coming down the line. It's not just, well, this is all we're going to get this decade. No, we'll get more then. So it's not like we have to put all of our chips in on this one hand.
We don't have to put all the butter on one side of the bread. We can
right,
butter
as
everything.
they do in Monte Carlo. Right, all the casinos are closed, so that's how they're spending their time now. They're just buttering bread and pushing it along the floor and saying "all in." They're really sad, those casino folk now. Returning Kongs. Look, I don't even know at this point. Like, I think that's almost too far off to even guess. I would say that anybody who is on that damn calendar would be a bet. Anybody who's referenced in the amusement park would be a bet. Anybody who is in Tropical Freeze for Switch, I think, at the very least, we're probably not going to lose them.
Yeah, that's the hope, right? The hope is that we'd start at least from where we left off with Tropical Freeze and not lose characters.
I think some of the more redundant characters, you might be right. Like, I think Chunky and Tiny are probably not going to be playable anytime soon. I would say Lanky would have probably the best shot of coming back because he's unique in the Kong Pantheon, and he's a meme. He's got a fan base. He's well known. So I'm going to say Lanky.
Yeah, well, the issue with Lanky is that you're trying to social distance and not touch each other. And he could touch it from like 10 feet away. And
that's why there hasn't been a new ARMS game since the original.
Yeah, because it's all about elbows these days. Wait, elbows are on arms. My bad.
In the live stream, Gibbon says, I've said it before, but I think Assassin's Creed is a good template for Donkey Kong. in an open world, climb over everything, and do side things on your way to your objective type formula. What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, so I have said on the Kongversation in the past on an episode that I cannot tell you what episode it was, but I have said in the past that one of the things is that 3D collectathon platformers did not disappear in the mid-2000s era of gaming. They just evolved into this sort of open sandbox games. The concepts that were introduced in Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie, they became Grand Theft Auto 3. They became Saints Row. They became Assassin's Creed, and dozens of other games in that vein. And now you have things like Red Dead Redemption and Spider-Man on the PS4 that are just kind of like, they've taken those ideas and they've said, well, we have an open world that you can explore, but it's not segmented in the kind of platformer. It's not segmented through the lens that 2D platformers applied to it, in the way that 3D platformers evolved from 2D platformers, in that you have worlds, and each world has complete X collectibles to move on to the next world. And they just said, well, we just can get rid of the platformer basis but focus on the open world exploration aspect of it. And that's where you get sandbox games. And I think Assassin's Creed ultimately is a degree evolved from Banjo-Kazooie. And yes, I think it's a good template for something like Donkey Kong if you wanted open world Donkey Kong. And I think there's a lot of people who don't want that. What they want is tight 2D platforming, not open world exploration, climbing and jumping on stuff. And I think you're going to find a split in the fan base about what they want from that. But there's other games. Assassin's Creed is one that it gets into that verticality of climbing up, buildings and doing parkour that really fits Donkey Kong as an animal. But also games like Spider-Man on the PlayStation 4. It's like swinging on webs through New York City in an open environment is not unlike what I might want to do to some extent in a Donkey Kong game, swinging through the jungle and being able to go anywhere and climb any tree.
Or the Arkham games, maybe not the floating cape bit. Well, maybe with Dixie Kong's helicopter spin, if you properly utilize that.
Right.
But and maybe not just like, oh, there's a group of Kremlin thugs, let me just swoop down and beat them up. I don't want that gameplay, but the whole going about in an open world environment, swinging, the whole translating the speed of the 2D Donkey Kong games into a 3D environment, I think would be important, because Donkey Kong 64, whether you like it or not, it was very plodding in comparison to the country games. So if you could duplicate the speed and kinetic energy of the country games, but still give the option to take it slow and explore like you can in those games, I think it would be interesting. And yeah, Assassin's Creed would have not been something I would have thought about, but now I'm I can see it now. Parkour.
All right.
A reference.
It's
So thank you for the call, Kevin. I'm sorry we saddled you with that coffee nickname that you've had all of these years now.
Yeah, it's like the snack that smiles back Folgers. Is that? I always forget. We have another call though. We have calls plural. Actually, you can do the next call.
Yeah,
let's do it.
Yeah, hopefully, we'll have plurals Donkey Kong game in the future.
Plurals.
All right, here
let's
we go.
go.
Not plurals.
Hey, this is Jeff's friend G-Man, sir, and my question is pretty simple. And whatever the future lies for the Kong, do you think that Funky Kong will provide a significant role in the game due to his popularity in the Switch port? And what other character that is not in Tropical Freeze do you think has the highest chance of returning? Not counting Animal Buddies, because I think that's low-hanging fruit. Which actual Kong do you think is the most likely character to return in the next Donkey Kong Country game or DK game, whatever? Thanks.
Jeff's friend, G-Man, sir.
You met him at E3, Hyle. So did I.
I did.
I shook his little E3? hand, and back then we were doing that. We were just shaking hands with people. It was
No,
crazy
back
time.
then we just licked each other. When we met somebody, we would just take their face and give them a lick, and it seemed like it was perfectly safe and sound and sane back then.
I'd
That's
say,
how we
oh,
said
you're
hello.
G-Man? He's like, yeah, you Jeff? I'm like, yeah. And then we would both spit into our hands, and we'd smack our hands together, and then we'd cut our hands. There was exchanging of
Blood
bloods,
brothers.
yeah. And in my blood, a little bit of my blood got into him, and a little bit of his blood got into me, and that's how you know we're friends.
Look, the summer of 2019, we didn't know what we know now.
It was a different
We've
time.
learned so
It was
much.
a different time.
Yeah, different time.
So the question, though, was about
Yeah.
character base. One, Funky Kong. Do you think Funky Kong sticks around to lend a purpose and a role in future Donkey Kong games because of their popularity?
So here's the thing. Here's the thing about Funky Kong, Jeff. Funky Kong, very popular now because of his role in Tropical Freeze for Switch, which is the definitive version of Tropical Freeze because it's on the Switch and not the Wii U. It wins. Funky is a meme unto himself now, you know, and Funky, though, had some popularity with Mario Kart Wii. You know, he's got some popularity now with Tropical Freeze for Switch, and I'm not going to discount that. I think Funky is an important part of the franchise, but he hasn't been in Smash Brothers. Smash Brothers is a tier above. It is like cemented. Once you're in Smash Brothers, that's it. The world is your oyster. You're in the top 1%. You're sucking oysters.
Well, that's fair enough, but I don't know. I think I feel pretty confident that Funky Kong will stick around in the main cast.
Funky Kong has always been an inexplicably hard to kill character in that he's basically been in more games than I'd have to do the math, but for a while there he was in more games than Cranky Kong. I don't know if Cranky Kong got ahead of him thanks to his appearances in the Conga games and
Hold on.
and what have you.
What game is Funky Kong in that Cranky Kong is not in aside from Mario Kart Wii?
Donkey Kong Land 2, you son of a bitch.
But I will say this, like, yeah, of the
Yeah.
Kong helpers, they do kind of come in tiers. You have Cranky Kong and Funky Kong, I would say, are in the top tier. And I think, you know, just the fact that you go from Donkey Kong Country into Donkey Kong Country 2 and Candy Kong didn't carry over, that immediately says Funky Kong and Cranky Kong are on a higher tier. And I think that Candy, you know, maybe Wrinkly Kong would be the middle tier, Candy Kong and Swanky Kong probably down in the lower tier in terms of how important they are, how likely they are to show up. Oddly enough, the next one in line might be Wrinkly Kong, of all things. Just because it's hard to imagine what you would use Candy Kong for, or like it's hard to imagine that anyone would have a desire to put Candy Kong in a video game.
Oh, I think some people have a desire for Candy Kong.
I don't like that. I think that it's fine. It's fine. You know what? That's fine. But I think that if you're a game developer and you're looking at what characters are we bringing back, I don't think Candy Kong is really that high on their list. And I think Funky Kong, what Funky Kong has going for him is, I think that inherent to his character is the role he plays, being a mechanic and a pilot and kind of, you know, a handyman. It inherently lends him to fulfilling a role, no matter what your game is. In Tropical Freeze, really all he did was take on the shop. But even if you put Cranky Kong back in the shop, it's really easy to find a reason to use Funky Kong.
And I think that's why Funky Kong has been such a durable character and such a persistent part of the franchise, even making it into Mario Kart at one point. It's because his character has kind of evolved and had the most growth out of the supporting Kongs, aside from Wrinkly. Dying was pretty big character development on her part. But, you know, Funky Kong started off as just this 1990s surfer archetype. And kind of grew, and they like really played up. Oh, he's good with machines. Oh, he's a mechanic. Oh, he's now like Donkey Kong's Q. The James Bond character, not the stupid conspiracy theory that idiots believe. But it's kind of like the character could have been a one-note joke, and Rare actually evolved him to the point where he's pretty hard to get rid of because he can fill so many roles in the franchise.
Yeah, I think pretty much any time you make a game about Donkey Kong, it's easy to see a place where Funky Kong would fit in, because if you're using any gadgets, if you're using any vehicles, anything remotely mechanical, that's Funky Kong's territory. It's even like, obviously Returns didn't have a use for him, but I think it's easy to see where his use would be in if you had a prerogative to include more characters than just 3. He would be up high on the list. Now the question then went to, aside from Animal Buddies, and I guess aside from King K. Rool, because G-Man Sir specified Kongs, what character?
He said Animal Buddies were low-hanging fruit, and I would argue that no, they're not. Like, I feel like Animal Buddies would be a bigger get at this point than a returning Kong who wasn't in Tropical Freeze. That's just my opinion. So you can discount that all you want, but I think like getting an Animal Buddy who's not Rambi or Squawks back would be so much bigger than getting a non-Tropical Freeze Kong.
I'm of two minds with that, because on the one hand, I think you're right. It's shocking to me, but it is true. It is shocking how somebody could make a game called Donkey Kong Country subtitle and not include Animal Buddies as a major component of the gameplay. It's just insane. It doesn't make any sense. But we've seen it twice now. And, I can see it. I can see any developer coming along and being like, yeah, we're going to make a bunch of levels where you jump on stuff, and we don't really need there to be a swordfish for us to do that. And that's stupid because it's wrong. But I could see it happening. On the other hand, it's hard for me to think of another Kong outside of the 5 that are in Tropical Freeze for Switch. It's hard for me to think of another Kong outside of those 5 that I think is more popular or iconic or likely than On Guard the Swordfish.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, On Guard the Swordfish he was the only Animal Buddy aside from Rambi and Squawks that was in DK64. He's the only Animal Buddy besides Rambi and Squawks and Quawks to be in Donkey Kong Barrel Blast. It just seems like he's just up there, and the only reason he missed the bill on Retros games is that they have a weird relationship with water levels, man. They don't do water levels right. So I just think that if anyone else made a Donkey Kong game and they started making a water level, one of the first things they'd think is, man, we got to get the swordfish in there because this is a water level.
Yeah, I've already given my answer to this. Lanky would be the most likely Kong to return, because I think for numerous reasons, but also he's just different enough from the others in Tropical Freeze that it would give you more gameplay opportunities. But I would really hope for the next Donkey Kong game, whatever form it takes, they do prioritize animals, Animal Buddies, riding them, manipulating the environment with them, because it's so much fun and it's such an essential part of the series. Riding this wild animal as your steed, like mowing down the environment or gracefully maneuvering through it or flying through it.
I think it's an important counterbalance to present Donkey Kong as being a part of nature rather than being something that is moving through and destroying nature. Because if everything you do in the game is knock down like the environment and jump on animals, it almost seems like Donkey Kong is too aggressive, like a Jungle Beat style portrayal. Whereas when he does it, but he's riding on an animal, and that animal is his friend, like the way that he has a relationship with the Animal Buddies, it grounds him. And really, I think it's an important part of Donkey Kong's character to have that relationship with nature and relationship with animals in the animal kingdom. Even Jungle Beat did it. Jungle Beat had like 5 Animal Buddies in it.
Yeah. I mean, they were original Animal Buddies, but they were still Animal Buddies.
Yeah, and I will say, if in terms of Kongs, if there's still a place for those other Kongs to work into the gameplay. If you look at Tropical Freeze, Funky Kong has a what do you call that? Like a bubble toy machine for little figurines. Why couldn't the bubble toy figurine thing be like a Swanky Kong bonus game? It's easy to see how that could work. Wrinkly Kong is a ghost. She could be the one doing your time trial ghost, or she could be the Super Kong equivalent of like, I died too much, can you skip the level for me? Or she could be the equivalent of a checkpoint instead of that stupid ass pig that I want to kill and eat.
Tiny Kong could do your taxes.
Tiny Kong can do your taxes, which brings us back to the whole Yoshi thing. It's just Donkey Kong fans and Yoshi fans, we really don't. We're on two sides. We're on opposite sides of the butter bread. Us and Yoshi, we pay our taxes.
It's because Yoshi's Island and Donkey Kong Country 2 were positioned as natural enemies, and we've never reconciled that. Like, I think we buried the hatchet with the Metroid fan base, but yeah, man,
Yoshi, it's
the
sexual tension. Like, we're not really sure how his reproductive thing works. He's always laying eggs, and we're just like under the surface turned on, but we hate ourselves for that, and so we hate Yoshi.
Oh, when you said under the surface turned on, I was picturing like the scenario where we were under a glass coffee table and Yoshi was performing acts.
Oh yeah, it's that long tongue. Us. What can he do with that tongue? You don't know, but you want to find out.
Anyway, yeah. So did we?
I think we answered the question.
G-Mancer's question.
We did a good job.
G-Mancer?
I think we did a great job.
Yeah. All right.
I'm proud of us.
All right. So we have another call. We have another call to take, and then we'll give our final thoughts on the future of Donkey Kong for now, because I'm sure here on DK Vine's Kongversation, we'll be discussing Donkey Kong again at some point. Probably, just a hunch.
Hey Hyle, hey Jeff, it's Eric here, calling to get your thoughts on this potential big new Donkey Kong game. What do you think King K. Rool's role will be in all of this? It's a foregone conclusion that he'll be returning, but in what capacity? Do you expect him to resume his antagonistic role from the previous games? Or will he be more of a frenemy character like King DDD going forward? Personally, I want him to stay as a boss, but I wouldn't say no to a secret mod that lets you play as K. Rool. What do you guys think?
What do we think?
Well, I'm of two minds about this, because I can see it going two ways. Honestly, I don't know. I like, if they feel like they have to use K. Rool, and they do, trust me on that, then I could see them saying, well, maybe we don't want to make him the boss. Maybe we want to do our own things with the enemies. Like, I don't necessarily think that it's for certain that the Kremlings will be back aside from K. Rool. K. Rool is a lock. K. Rool, count on that. But I would say it's maybe 50-50, even odds, whether or not the Kremlings are the antagonist of the game. And if that's the case, then what role would K. Rool have? I don't know. It could be the fact that he could be a playable character. And like, we had that theory back when Retro was teasing who's the fourth playable Kong in Tropical Freeze, and we made the joke that it would be K. Rool in a gorilla costume. And we kind of liked that at the time, or at least I did. But we wanted K. Rool to stay an antagonist. We don't want him to go the DDD route where he's kind of nerfed as a threat. But when a character reaches the status that K. Rool has almost overnight, I don't know, like, if we can escape that fate necessarily. Now Bowser has remained Mario's antagonist, but occasionally they do have him in that sillier frenemy or like unwitting ally kind of role. And I could see K. Rool kind of falling into that, but for his first big game back, I see him more as an antagonist, at least in this one. And I don't know if he'll have the Kremlin crew. I don't know if he'll be commanding something new or what's going on. He'll have a big role in the game's story. But other than that, your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah, no, I think, well, personally, I do think we're going to get the Kremlings back as a main antagonist, as a main antagonistic force, enemy force in the game, in the same way that, in Tropical Freeze, you had the Snowmads, and not every enemy in the game will be a Kremling, just like in the classics. And, you can have side enemies that are like animals that are part of the Kremling army, or the wider Kremling army, but they're not crocodiles. They're not Kremlings. But I think that overall you're going to have Kremlings, not just K. Rool, back. Now, the question is, that's just me speculating. But the question is, what will K. Rool do? I think that if they make regular games in the way we hope they will, I think that they are going to be willing, and K. Rool is going to be adaptable to fulfill a variety of different roles from game to game, where I think you'll always see him have a role in the plot, even if they bring in new villains. And I think they will do that. I just think it's what you see with pretty much every other franchise. Bowser is not necessarily always the only bad guy in a Mario plot. He's sometimes like, there's an even bigger bad, and Bowser's kind of there. Or there's a different thing, and it turns out Bowser was manipulating that thing, or just taking advantage and reacting to that thing. And so Bowser's part of that plot. You see it in Kirby. You see it in every platformer. The main quote-unquote villain of the franchise is not necessarily the main or only villain in each game. And where I think you'll see it differ from the classic games, and where it will differ from Retro's games, is that you'll see him pop up in the game outside of the ending. I think that the fact that K. Rool is so popular in Smash, and he's so popular as a character in the brand, it'll be more like Bowser. In a Mario game, you have an opening cutscene, and you have Bowser, and he's going to like take away all of Mario's candy, and then every single world, you're going to have Bowser pop up in his hot air balloon that's made of candy, or whatever the plot in that game is, and then he'll just laugh evilly as he steals even more candy, and then he turns them into little mini bosses, and you fight them. And so you get to see Bowser every couple hours of gameplay, maximum. Like maybe every hour.
I mean, we saw it with K. Rool and Donkey Kong 64, in between every world, you'd have that cutscene with him. He also kept popping up in like, Jungle Climber. So I think you're going to see that like at the end of every world. Oh, here's K. Rool. What's he up to? So yeah, he's definitely going to get lots of screen time. And I'll say if they do bring the Kremlings back, I could even see the compromise being they might have one classic Kremling enemy type like critters or claptraps for sure, right? Claptraps. But you're going to see mostly original Kremlings developed by, if it is EPD, then Nintendo EPD. And that's keeping in spirit with the original games too, because the Kremlings were basically reinvented for every main iteration of the series. Donkey Kong Country 2, it was a lot of the returning Kremlings, but they had, pirate gimmicks now. But then you also had completely new Kremlings in there. Donkey Kong Country 3 was all new Kremlings. Donkey Kong 64 was a bit of a mix. But yeah, I think they're going to just get inventive and make the Kremlings their own, which I think is important because they need to have ownership over Donkey Kong, and they need to embrace the past while also pushing it forward. So, if the Kremlings are the antagonist, don't expect to see just critters, crushas, clumps. You're gonna see some new shit.
Yeah, this isn't gonna be like a pay-on game. And for all of the positives that I love the pay-on games, but this is going to be a new studio that's given full license to like move the brand forward, and it's not going to be like, oh, we need an enemy, let's use Neek and Flapper or Flitter. Like I don't think it'll be like that where they're just pulling enemies from the past. That's just not really Nintendo. That's not really how any modern Nintendo games work. You might see some stuff coming back, but a lot of it's going to be brand new. And I'll say this.
Well, and honestly,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's never how Donkey Kong's that's never really how Donkey Kong's worked, outside of maybe Donkey Kong 64 and the pay-on games. Like, when did we ever get many returning enemies? Zingers, crossed over from country to country too.
Well, this is what I was about to say.
And then
I will say, this might be, I don't know, this might be controversial. I don't know if people agree with this, but I feel strongly about it. I think the most iconic enemy of the Kremling crew is not a Kremling. It's Zingers. I think zingers are the most iconic Donkey Kong enemy. And, I want them back. So if you give me, maybe a Claptrap, because Claptraps have a big role in Smash Brothers, and they have this kind of tie to King K. Rool himself, how he has the pet Claptrap that he pets in the DK64 cutscenes. You bring me Claptraps and maybe Critters, because they've appeared in a lot of spin-off material in racing, in Mario Soccer, Mario Football. But more than anything, I want zingers. Give me that.
I want zingers too, and that was like so upsetting in Tropical Freeze when we got those bee enemies. And you're just like, these aren't as good as zingers. And like it was fine when Donkey Kong Country 3 when they were buzzes, because those were like weird freaks, and you're like, okay, something new. And then Jungle Beat had all those bee enemies, and you were like, oh, they're not zingers, and so we need to just get past they're not zingers by bringing back zingers, and they're associated with the Kremlin, so this would be the time.
Well, and zingers are in DK64 also, because that game, although it had new enemies, it also brought most of the returning ones that it did have. They came from Donkey Kong Country 1, which was like Naughties, zingers.
There were some Country 2 enemies.
Yeah, you're right. There's a few. There's some of the underwater levels, especially.
And we had Kaboom. Yeah, Kabooms were in there. Yeah, Clobber,
but I think that in terms of where do people pull inspiration when they want to pay homage or represent Donkey Kong as a franchise, I think is what you see in Smash Brothers, and I think is where you see outside of Smash Brothers, is that 90%, maybe more, of what is Donkey Kong is the game Donkey Kong Country and the game Donkey Kong 64.
Yeah, no, you're right. And it's a hard pill to swallow for us Country 2 diehards and fanatics. And I think it's changed a little bit, because I think the cult of Country 2 has kind of wore people down to the point where, like, okay. But you're right. Country and 64, they are the two hallmarks of the series, because those are the games that most people played. Either they're the Country generation or they're of the 64 generation. But yeah, it's like more people played those than the sequels.
That's true. And then if you want to get more of the deep cut stuff, that's going to come in sequels. You got to hope that if they keep making more Donkey Kong games, that's when they'll start to branch out and be like more comfortable to reference past stuff alongside their new stuff after they get the basics kind of in there, and they're not going to bring everything back in one game.
Here's a question before we get into the final thoughts, Jeff, because I just considered this. I just said Country and 64 are the two main games people know. There is a third now, though, and that is Donkey Kong Country Returns. Donkey Kong Country Returns was a huge game that came out almost 10 years ago. An entire generation of people were Donkey Kong fans around that game, and a heavy part of the upcoming Donkey Kong section of Super Nintendo World is based on Donkey Kong Country Returns. So even if Retro isn't developing the next game, and they're not, even if they're moving forward and incorporating more of the classic rare elements into this, which they are, what elements from Donkey Kong Country Returns would you bring back, because they are now just as iconic or important as those rare elements?
I think screaming pillars.
Pillars, yes.
Mm-hmm. They're probably up there. They're probably up there as one of the most iconic, because they're not just an enemy, but it's almost a part of what defines the environment in Donkey Kong's jungle now. Like I think the biggest thing about the retro games, what they've contributed to Donkey Kong's brand, is the idea of what does Donkey Kong Island look like in the modern HD era. Donkey Kong Country, the first game, was so photorealistic in a lot of ways that, they wouldn't keep that look forever. Donkey Kong 64, on the other hand, is very rudimentary because 3D graphics on the N64 just weren't like super advanced yet. And Donkey Kong Country Returns was basically the first modern HD, it wasn't HD, but the modern games with 3D graphics that had the ability to decide what is going to be the look of the franchise. They could have gone hyper realistic like Donkey Kong Country, but they instead laid out this artistic design of a stylized cartoony jungle that I think has kind of become standard for what Donkey Kong looks like.
And it's they've kind of incorporated this. It's more Mesoamerican, I think, than Rare's designs were. But so I think we're gonna see. I think it's gonna go in its own visual direction than Retro's games, but I think it's gonna lean more heavily on Retro's template than Rare's. At least as far as the look of the jungles, the look of Donkey Kong Island. They might bring back the look of the classic islands. It's in K. Rool's Final Smash, and even if we have the fan explanation and that's how the face was destroyed, you see, because he went back in time. No, it's I think they're gonna bring back the way it looks, because there's no reason for it to look like it does in the Returns era. It's stupid. I'll just say it now. I hate the way they made the island look in Returns and Tropical Freeze. There was no reason to make it look less distinguished than it did. It was already iconic, at least among Donkey Kong fans, and it looks like nothing in Returns.
I think that's the biggest misstep of Returns, of how they represent Donkey Kong, because that island it's on the map screen from the very first level of Donkey Kong Country. You see what it looks like. It's also what Donkey Kong 64 looks like. It's also in the background in Donkey Kong Country 2. So the island design is just, it's all over the series imagery. They shouldn't have screwed that part up. But yeah, I think Screaming Pillars. I think probably some element of Tiki enemies, because those were not in Tropical Freeze really at all to my memory, other than Screaming Pillars. But I'm talking about the wooden animate creatures that, I don't think they were really in Tropical Freeze, but you've seen them in everything else.
Tiki Goons. You're referring to Tiki Goons.
And the flying ones. The little...
Tiki Buzzes.
They're like a little Tiki Hoot, like owl guy. I don't remember all the names. Point is...
Tiki Buzzes.
Tiki Buzz.
They're called Tiki Buzzes.
That's what you see in Mario Kart. That's what you see in Smash. Remember Smash for Nintendo 3DS had critters, and it had Tiki Buzzes as enemies in the Smash Run mode.
Yeah.
And I think that I think maybe we've seen some of that Tiki stuff in the Universal Studios world. So I wouldn't be surprised. I think Tiki stuff that's just kind of general enemies, they could mix in there. We fans will have to explain those things, because they won't have a scene where King K. Rool takes control of the Tiki army because he has a magic amulet and they listen to him now. They won't explain that. We'll have to fan wank everything, but that's kind of half of the fun. So,
well, here's the thing: the Tiki Tak tribe was essentially destroyed, save for a few surviving Tiki Goons or what have you. All the priests, they got banana bukkaki'd, remember? So, you could have some surviving Tikis join up with the Kremlin crew out of survival tactics. That wouldn't be too hard to explain. I don't know if we'll see the Tikis back. I think even Retro knew the fans hated those, right? I think it was just but that they tried to recreate the appeal of the Kremlins with the snowmans.
Yeah.
And to somewhat success, but I think Screaming Pillars for sure.
Yeah.
Because Screaming Pillars, they're more of an environmental factor. They kind of combine a couple different things, but you don't really need to attach them to any specific enemy. They can just be part of the infrastructure of the island, and they're an iconic obstacle in that they appeared in both Returns and Tropical Freeze and Mario Kart, and were they in the Smash for Wii U stage?
I don't think so.
Or
something destroys the barrel on the side every so often, right? Or something comes down and smashes that. So maybe that was a Screaming Pillar. I don't remember. The problem is that they took that stage out of Smash. They didn't put it in Smash Ultimate, and if they did, I would remember it.
Right.
But who's played Smash for Wii U in a while? That game it wasn't very popular among us. But and I'll say the last thing is in terms of if Returns is Returns on the level of Donkey Kong Country 1 and Donkey Kong 64 in terms of what is iconic to the series, I think that where it will mostly be felt is what we already said about how they render the environment, how they design the art style of the jungles and the temples of Donkey Kong Island. But I think outside of that, there's really not a lot of content in Returns that you're going to see people nostalgic for and wanting that to come back. I think the look of it will carry over, and maybe Screaming Pillars for sure. Maybe some Tiki stuff once in a while.
By the way, Jeff, I just looked it up because you just mentioned them again. They are in the jungle hijinks stage of Super Smash Bros.
They come down and smash the barrel so that you can't blast into the background anymore.
They're also in Mario Golf World Tour
on
the DK Jungle Golf Course, but that's not really an iconic appearance because only DK Vine nerds really fetishize the Mario Golf games.
Right. So I think that in terms of moving forward, I don't think Returns is something that you said like, oh, this is a generation of people are fans of Donkey Kong because of that game. I don't know. And I think that where it falls different is that it is not so much a product that stands alone on its own as much as it was heavily trying to recreate a nostalgia for the original Donkey Kong Country. Whereas when Donkey Kong Country came out, there was no there was nothing about it that was not pretending to be something brand new. This is a brand new generation of Donkey Kong. And I think that it laid down so much unique groundwork. Donkey Kong 64 lays down a ton of unique groundwork. Donkey Kong Country Returns mostly just brings back stuff we wanted, and then the new stuff it does, people don't like much. I don't know if there's a generation of kids that are going to play that game, that did play that game 10 years ago and became Donkey Kong fans because of it. That's what I worry the most, is I worry about that game's ability to hook people into a universe in the way that Rare's games did. And that I don't know how many kids you see joining online right now saying, I'm a huge fan of the lore of Donkey Kong because I played Donkey Kong Country Returns. So that could be something we see over some time. We could see whether that pans out or not.
Yeah, wait till the new Donkey Kong game is announced and have all these people complaining, where the fuck is Professor Chops?
Oh, yeah.
Where is Professor... How are you making a Donkey Kong game without Professor Chops?
You never got to see the continuation of the arc of Squidicus, the giant octopus. Anyway.
Professor Chops might have like a 20% chance of coming back.
I don't like that. 15%. Please don't. That's the thing where if you're taking on the thing and you want to bring some stuff back, but obviously you want to create some new stuff, like everybody wants. Nobody expects them to make a new game and not create anything new. There's your chance. Make something new and don't bring back Professor Chops. You can make anything new in his place and nobody will complain.
I'll say this. I hope it takes mostly. Okay, let's say it's 40% rare stuff. Let's say 20% retro stuff. Let's say 5% Jungle Beat, and then the rest is new.
That seems pretty fair. I mean, obviously, I think add another 5% of arcade era references because you're gonna get those.
Oh yeah,
but then
at the very least, have more than just arcade references, or don't just reference Super Mario Brothers games. Like, don't put the tank from the Dark World in Super Mario Brothers 3.
They had Billy Mitchell on there.
Not reference a country
Remember
game.
Billy Mitchell?
Billy Mitchell, yeah.
That aged well.
The only Donkey Kong fan who's ever been referenced in a Donkey Kong game, Billy Mitchell.
Well, Professor Chops is a Donkey Kong fan.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe maybe it could have been worse. I don't know if OJ is a Donkey Kong fan. They could have referenced OJ.
So yeah, I think we're
the juice.
The juice. My talk water, which is different than no juice.
Yeah, I see now why you call it water, not juice.
It's just there's very
you don't want to reference
very
OJ.
Deliberate effort. So I think we're at the point where we can kind of bring it all together into one double-sided butter bread and wrap up our thoughts here.
Yeah. So a new Donkey Kong game is definitely in the works. I don't know, because a lot of people are saying, well, Hyle and Jeff of DK Vine's Kongversation means we're going to see it at E3, or the void where E3 was going to be, that we're still going to get game announcements around. That's where we're going to have this announced, right? I don't know. I don't have any idea. It could be another year. It could be some amount of time. It doesn't even have to be announced around an E3. So I don't think put any bets on when we're going to see this announced.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I was
Sorry.
thinking last
Yeah.
year. I was thinking last year was the year. And my reason for thinking that was that Nintendo does this thing sometimes where when they have a big project planned in an IP, they push through a small project in that same IP ahead of time. I don't know the logic. Maybe it whets the appetite. But it's like it gets the brand name out there. And so the example being Returns 3D preceded Tropical Freeze. Jungle Beat New Play Control preceded Country Returns. The Donkey Kong Country Game Boy Advance ports preceded Jungle Beat. Or they started to come out before Jungle Beat. So, I think, and it does, you can see that example happening in other franchises sometimes. And so I was looking at it and I was thinking, Tropical Freeze port, that means next year we're getting actual Donkey Kong sequel. And it didn't happen. That doesn't mean that wasn't even part of the plan. It could just be that it'd take it another year longer or another year longer or another, you never know when these things are going to take. Sometimes development takes longer than you plan for. And sometimes we don't know that it's taking longer because we don't know when they started on it. We have no idea. So,
and I think the whole Wii U to Switch cycle is a little bit weird because they wanted to make more money off of all these games they developed for the Wii U that didn't do as well as they believed they should have because it was the Wii U. So I think it was more just recouping all this money for Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze on the Switch, which they did. So I don't know if it necessarily had anything to do with, we're going to whet people's appetites for the next Donkey Kong game. It was part of that, but I don't think it was like, we're going to release this and then a month later announce the next one. Not necessarily. It was just to make Donkey Kong or maybe prove Donkey Kong's bona fides.
Yeah, I think part of what it is,
if there was any doubt.
I think part of what it is that you put out a port because you want to keep an IP relevant. And if you want to keep an IP relevant, it also probably means you're working on another game. So that's the logic there. That's the idea that, like, if they weren't making another game, that's because they don't necessarily have a high priority on the IP. And if they don't have a high priority on the IP, why would they make the port at all? So, there's a little bit of logic there. It could just mean nothing. But I think most definitely, absolutely, the game is coming out this year. That's what we agreed on. No, I'm just kidding. We don't know. Maybe next decade. Maybe in between. Maybe it's 5 years out. Maybe it's 3 years out. There's no way to know.
Here's my final guess. Here's my final prediction, and then we'll wrap this up. And we'll go wash our hands and maybe step in the shower so we can touch our faces. Not together, because we're Skyping. We're not in the same studio. That's how we normally end a conversation, is we all get in
and
the
we
shower,
touch each other's faces.
Right. So I think no matter what kind of game it is, no matter what kind of style of platformer it is, I think it will still carry the Donkey Kong Country branding, even if it's not a traditional 2D Donkey Kong Country game. Because I feel like Donkey Kong Country in the West is almost as ubiquitous now for the brand as, say, Super Mario is for the Mario series. When it's not dealing with the arcade originals, it's Donkey Kong Country. So I don't think we're going to get this, like, weird, like, Donkey Kong 64. Yeah. I think if Donkey Kong 64 came out now, it would be, or had the philosophy it does now, but came out then, it would be Donkey Kong Country 64.
And it almost was, right? That was like the working title, right?
I mean, I don't know. There's so many working titles for that game.
Well, the point is that if Donkey Kong Country was ever in a working title for that game, it showed you that even back then, they didn't necessarily think country had to mean 2D side-scrolling platformer. I think it's just something we think of now because so much time has passed. that country is only this certain style of game, right? But I don't know. I think that if they're pushing the Donkey Kong brand, all of the big games have had that country style. I think I agree with you. I think that a 3D game that came out now would have country in the title.
Now, again, that's just a marketing thing for the West, because in Japan, Donkey Kong Country isn't a thing. No. So,
I don't think country is
but
the
I think
word.
For us,
I don't think the word country has to be the word bros for us. Like, if you put bros in a title, Mario Bros, you know that's like a side-scroller, right? Like, Super Mario Odyssey is not called Super Mario Brothers Odyssey. But I don't think country has to work that way, and I think that if they want to sell people on the idea... I just think the brand name, I think you're right. I think the brand name is too big to drop country from it. It tells people this is one to pay attention to.
It's Donkey Kong Country Returns that I think that made it indispensable. Because that's the game that really restored Donkey Kong to sales prominence after being in the wilderness a bit during the GameCube era. And so it's like, this is not an experimental Donkey Kong title. This is the real deal here. And I think I think that's where the tide turned. I could be wrong, because after all, these are all just silly little predictions from people who don't know much. But as you pointed out, Jeff, I do have a big head, which is why my mother's birthing of me was so difficult.
I said you had a tall head. I said your eyes were... there was more space above your eyes to the top of your head than there was on my face.
Look, Jeff, I did stretch it out, all right? There's a reason my mom is now referred to as Lanky Bush.
This has been a File 2 production.
Que rico.
I thought I was going to have to stop fucking dogs. Can we cut that one? Is that one going to make it in the live cut? I don't know. So